My guest today is a longtime friend. We share not only our friendship over all those years, but our first names. So without any further ado, Lance is here. Let's start off with, where were you born?
Alexandria, Virginia. My father was in the U.S. Air Force, and so working in the Pentagon.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Was he an officer in the Air Force?
Yes, he was a pilot.
A pilot?
Yeah.
What was he in the Pentagon for then? If he was, if the pilots don't usually stay in the Pentagon, they're out there flying.
No, they have rotations.
Okay.
So he spent 23 years in the Air Force, brought us to Japan. The way that I'm half Japanese, he came during the occupation.
Is that
and he met my mother, and my mother was actually, although she 100% Japanese, was born in New York, along with her 3 sisters.
Okay, now how many siblings do you have? Just a
2.
sister?
A brother and sister, both older than me.
They're both, I thought you were the oldest.
No. And
So how many years difference between you and the oldest?
2.5 years.
So
So my sister is less than a year older than me.
is that right?
Yeah.
My God.
She's also an October child.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
How are your sister and brothers doing?
They're doing fine. My brother is retired. My sister, I guess she's retired.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So your mother and father, I know your father passed.
Yes.
How's
And my
your-
mother passed also.
Oh, she did? When did she
About
pass?
15 years ago.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that. But I didn't know either one of your parents. I mean, I met you, I was well into me, because you took me to the Tokyo Club. I'll never forget that, when it was in the old location.
Yes.
And there were 2 white guys sitting in the cafeteria, kind of like that. And I was doing the scanner business at the time, because I told you someday I want to join the Tokyo Club. And the 2 guys sat down and they said, "So what do you do, young man?" And I said, "I'm a scanner business." He said, "So who got you into that?" Straight up. I said, "Well," I told them the truth, how I got in. They said, "Okay, that's all we need to know." But you've been a member, because your father was a member of the Tokyo Club?
No.
Oh, you did that on your own.
Jack Dinkins sponsored me. Do you remember Jack? He actually, we're at the Tokyo American Club. He actually owned this property after the war.
He was the one I was sitting at the table. He said that.
Okay.
I met him at the table.
Okay, yeah.
And he said, "I'm the one that owned it, and I gave it to something, so for this amount, something as tsubo."
He sold it for what he paid for it because he figured, well, they really pressured him. He loved this vista.
Right.
And
I think at that time, you could actually see the Tokyo Bay, right?
Yeah, there was none of this. But he was very bitter about the Tokyo American Club because they pressed him to sell it, and he sold it for what he paid for it, and he never bought another place. And so he saw the real estate prices soar, and they never gave him like a complimentary membership. He never joined because he was bitter. And so what Jack is famous for is his first wife, Anne, had the first Jewish deli in Japan. And they served, it was right near where the Boecho, right next door.
Is that right?
Yeah, and you could get pastrami sandwiches. They would import pastrami and corned beef from New York. And that's a whole story about trying to get that into Japan at that time. And she was famous for cheesecakes, but they ended up getting divorced, and he married a Japanese woman.
Did he have any kids by the first one?
I don't know.
You don't know if he... Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me, so you grew up here. No, you said you were born in New York.
No, I was born in Virginia.
That's right, Virginia.
Yeah, I'm living in New York now.
How long did you live in Virginia, do you know?
Before I moved here?
Yes.
Less than a year.
Okay, so right.
and then I came to Japan. My father was transferred to Tachikawa, and that was 1953.
What did he fly?
Back then, pilots flew everything.
Oh, okay. When you're a pilot, this is what you're going to be in today.
He flew fighter jets, bombers, transport planes.
Okay.
It was very different, right?
What's the rank that he came out at?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then after the 23 years in the Air Force, he joined Air America. If you're familiar with
yes,
them.
I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he lived in Vientiane, Laos while we were going to school here. And the reason why we weren't with him in Laos is there was nothing there, and there was not even a school. And so we would have to do correspondence school. And my brother, sister, and I were just, certainly me, were not disciplined enough to do something like that. So we were here, and I attended St. Mary's.
All the way from elementary?
No, that was later. We stayed for 4 years. We went back to Virginia for 4 years, Colorado Springs for a year and a half. Then he was stationed in Korea, and during that time, he wasn't allowed to have his family with him. So we lived in Tokyo, and he lived in Korea.
Your mom and dad stayed together the whole time?
No, they got divorced. In fact, you're mentioning it right at the time when they started to have their problems.
What time was that? How old were you
when
then?
we were separated. I was in 5th and 6th grade at St. Mary's.
So you never got a chance to be close to your dad?
I'm the closest of the three of us. My brother and sister seemed to really favor my mother's position. Even though I was the most immature and still am, I thought that when I looked at them, they didn't belong together. And so I thought, they both deserve their happiness. My mother, that's a whole nother story, but she had some resentment. When we moved to Japan while he was in Korea, we lived with my aunt, who was with the U.S. Embassy working for National Science Foundation.
No, your mother's sister or your?
My mother's sister.
Okay.
Yeah. And I never understood why my aunt had something against my father. And the reason being, I learned much later, is that my father met my Aunt Yuki first. And they started dating.
This is your mother's older sister?
Yes, older sister. She had 3 older sisters. She was the youngest of 4. But he met my Aunt Yuki, and after they dated a little bit, she decided, okay, I'm going to bring him back and meet my family. And so she brings my dad to her family home, sees my mother, younger, cuter, and he made a switcheroo. And so my Aunt Yuki was always bitter about...
But at your father, what about your mother? What about her sister? Her sister. Yeah.
I don't know too much about it,
okay,
but there was always this conflict
right.
Because of that.
I don't think so.
She felt she was jilted, and...
Did she ever get married?
Never. And because my parents separated after the Korea time, when they were apart, and my mom had a year and a half of Yuki, talking to her. We were more brought up, instead of with my father and mother, it was Yuki and my mother.
So she stayed with you?
Quite a bit, yeah.
Okay.
We moved back to Japan again later when my father joined Air America, and Yuki lived with us. And my mother and Yuki lived together until they both passed in their 80s.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they were the closest of the sisters?
Yes.
What about the oldest sister?
The oldest one, the other 3 didn't care for because she was
the
bossy.
No,
there were 4 sisters.
There were 4 sisters?
Yeah.
Your mother's the youngest of 4?
Yes.
And then the next would be your aunt?
Sheena, and then Yuki.
So Sheena's out. So what happened to Sheena? Aunt Sheena?
She was living in Maryland.
Okay.
She married an American.
And so you have cousins?
Yes.
Right. Around the same age, maybe?
Yes. I have a cousin who is 1 month younger than me. Mm-hmm. And then he's the oldest of their 3. And they're all spanned kind of like us, tightly.
Right.
And we're close to them somewhat.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
so you came and you were raised by your aunt and your mother. So what
yes,
was that
and
like?
I would see my dad from time to time, but we would get together in Hong Kong or Bangkok.
You mean this is after you became an adult?
No. While I was at St. Mary's.
He'd send for you or something? Or?
My mother and father were still seeing each other some, so we didn't want to go to Laos very often. I did that a few times. but there was nothing there. The country had 2 paved roads, 1 elevator, no telephones. It was very primitive. And so we would meet somewhere in between, or he would come to Japan. We would meet in Hong Kong a lot, and we would meet in Bangkok. And Bangkok was mostly dirt roads back then in the 60s.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And after, he was also in Udon, Thailand, which is just across the Mekong River from Vientiane. But he spent his last 2.5 years of the war in Saigon. Wow. And was shuttling people out during the evacuation.
Right. That's probably in the 70s, right? Early 70s?
Yeah, that was 75.
Right, because I came in at that time, 71. I was drafted, got the draft notice. You missed all that.
Well, I didn't miss it. I just wasn't drafted.
Okay, I was drafted.
They didn't want me.
Yeah, they wanted me, I'll tell you. So tell me, so you've done a lot of different things in your life too, but what did you really focus on when you were in school? Were you a pretty good student? Or you said you weren't a good student.
Yeah, I came to St. Mary's from public education in the U.S.
Okay.
And starting in 5th grade, they were already had Latin for a year or two. French. And so I was behind on that, and the math was much more advanced. After 6th grade, we went to the States for a year. And I didn't carry a book home at all in 7th grade.
They were way behind you.
Yeah, everyone was behind me. Then, in 8th grade, we moved back to Japan, and I'm 1 year further behind, and they've started Latin as well as being behind in French. And so I can remember bringing my report card home, and St. Mary's had this thing that was like, looking back, it was kind of torture. 5 times a year, we'd get our report card, and there would be a general assembly in the gym, and everyone would line up, the entire school, and they would call out the top 5 from each class, and you got to go up on the stage. Needless to say, I never got on the stage, at least not for that. And then the report cards, these yellow report cards, would be set on the desk of the teacher. We all sat in the same room, except for religion. The teacher just changed, and we just stayed in the same place the whole time. And sometime during the day, 5 times a year, the headmaster, in the case of elementary school, or in high school, the high school principal would come in, grab the deck of report cards, and read out everyone's grades in front of the entire class, starting with number 1 in the rank. And after a while, you're like, let me be the next one. I can remember sitting there, right? Let me be the next one. And then at the end, it's kind of like when you're at the airport and you're waiting for your luggage and you're saying, I hope I get my luggage first.
Right.
And then after a while, it's like, I hope my luggage made
it, right.
Right? So anyway, this one report card period, I take my report card home, and my mom says, Lance, you're last in your class, because it shows like 27,
people, and you're 27.
And I wasn't 27, I was 26. I said, no, Mom, I'm next to last. And thank God for this guy, Donnie Gaddy, for holding out the last spot. And as the years went by, I slowly, advanced, and so then I was in the middle of the pack, and then I was somewhere between in senior year at the bottom of the top quartile or the top of the 3rd quartile, kind of in there. And St. Mary's was a great learning experience in so many ways. A lot of memorization of facts that I never used again.
All schools were doing that.
Right, but it was the discipline, it was the camaraderie.
That's right. You still have
the values that are ingrained in you, the friendships that exist even today.
That's right.
I came back at this time to visit Japan because the St. Mary's Carnival was last weekend.
Wow.
And so I wanted to go there, and I would see a bunch of friends. Tomorrow I'm seeing 3 of my classmates.
Okay.
So, you know, it's...
Yeah, you guys are really
Yeah,
tight.
yeah.
That's true.
We knew, you know, we lived together, literally,
That's
right?
right.
The same person sitting next to me for a whole year, and then the following year, you know, we're all together again.
That's right.
And we knew everything about each other.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Boston College, and
Did you go straight out of high school from
yeah,
St. Mary's to Boston?
And because of my academic, you know, shakiness, whatever, I was waitlisted at Boston College to get in, and I did end up getting in. But when I got there, I decided, well, I better work, because I know I was the last person to be accepted, right? And so I'm at the bottom of the, you know, the pool. You know, I should have done it for myself, but the reason why I worked so hard is that I didn't want to flunk out, because I had a girlfriend at ASIJ. She was a year behind me, and she was a really good student. She became a judge. I'm still in touch with her. And I was going to be embarrassed if I flunked out. What is Denise going to say, right? And I would be so embarrassed in front of my girlfriend. And that's what drove me to actually, I got in the honors program, and so I actually saw her a couple of years ago, and I told her, I said, "You're the reason why."
She never knew that.
No,
She knew,
no,
okay, of course not. Of course not. Yeah.
You know, and I was afraid that I would have to come back as a failure.
That's right, right. So Lance, what did you graduate with? I mean, what did you?
I studied economics and marketing as an undergraduate. And then I didn't know why I was doing it, but I was applying to law school and business school. And it was because all of the other people in the honors program were doing that too. I didn't necessarily have a lot of insight as a kid. I just kind of, you know, bobbled along, and whatever, you know, came, and I would react. Or
do you think that played a big part in the way that you've lived your life up till now?
Yeah.
Because you've had how many? Have you ever counted how many businesses you've been involved in?
Oh, right now I'm involved with a whole bunch too. The thing is, you know, I've got these conflicting character flaws. One is I'm fundamentally lazy. People don't think I'm lazy because I'm working all the time, but curiosity wins, and I'm like chasing shiny balls all the time and trying to, you know, and I see the possibilities, right? And so it gives me energy. Yeah, I'm like you, 70 years old, and still going, right? And they say, you know, yeah. And I see other people that were my classmates, and you know, some of them are. One of them had COPD and you know, was in hospice. I was communicating with him, but you know, he had become sedentary.
Same age?
My classmate at St. Mary's, and then at some Boston College classmates, you know, they're using walkers or wheelchairs and so forth, right? It's just like, my God.
But don't you have to every now and then, and it seems regularly throughout the month, tell yourself, I'm really 70?
Yeah, I don't know where the time went.
Does it seem like we're 70, Lance? It blows my mind.
I did.
Oh, by the way,
my father died at 67, so you know, I passed him, right?
My father died at 72, so I have 2 more years. I don't know, but I tell people I have another 20 to 30 years possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, in good health.
Yeah.
That's how I'm thinking about it.
So what I was going to say is I applied to business school, and the reason for doing that is my mom, being like all Asian mothers, wanted me to be a doctor. And obviously I'm not a doctor, so it was one of the long list of disappointments that I...
What about your brother and sister who were closer to her?
No, but anyway, the one insight that I had though at that time, which has helped guide me, is I realized that if I had become a doctor or some other professional, I'm competitive. And so you want to be the best in any of those professions, you end up specializing. You might be the expert, world expert in some valve of the heart. And so what happens is you know more and more about less and less, and your community of contacts just keeps shrinking, the people who relate to you.
I didn't think about that.
In business, it's the opposite. So as you advance, you know less and less about more and more. And so that's why, I'm jumping and doing all kinds of different things. It's because I realize my personality is I love to meet people. It energizes me. I love to do new things. I love to learn. And business is the place where you can do that, because if you become the CEO, you've got manufacturing, you've got sales, you've got marketing, human resources, R&D, everything reporting to you. And that's so much more fun. That one insight early on, I thought, okay, well, that's me.
Okay. To date, what do you consider to be your most profitable business that you've done?
Oh boy. The one that probably had the highest ROI was some restaurants that I invested in.
How old were you when you did that? How old were you?
Not that long ago.
Oh, this is recent. Okay, so
25 years ago,
okay.
Something like that. And the reason why they were successful is probably because I just stayed out of the way. It was a investment, and I, gave some guidance. I helped with some of the negotiations and buying the business and so forth.
At the beginning, right?
Yeah. We had a general manager. Somebody would realize that I was owning it along with one or two other partners. Mm-hmm. And people would come up to me and go, Lance, I want to tell you that this happened and I saw this. I said, well, you ought to tell Steve, the general manager. They said, well, aren't you the owner? I said, yeah, but I hold Steve accountable. So if I make a decision and hold Steve accountable, is that fair? And they shake their head, and it's like, so, I'll tell Steve.
What was the first business you got into?
My job out of business school was with Mackenzie.
Okay.
And I worked in New York, and then I transferred to the Tokyo office and worked with the famous or infamous Kenichi Ohmae.
I didn't know him, no.
He's was called Mr. Strategy at the time.
Okay. Is he still around? Is he still around?
Yes. In fact, I'm flying back to Japan in July because there's a 50th anniversary of the opening of the Mackenzie Tokyo office, and Ken is going to speak.
How old is Ken now?
He's probably about 80 or late 70s.
Okay.
Has tremendous energy, just brilliant individual. I've met a lot of smart people, but he's got to be either number one or two. Right. Just extraordinary.
How long did you stay with him?
We worked nonstop together for about 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was your job with Mackenzie?
I was a consultant. I was managing projects.
Okay.
The Tokyo office had a 2.5-year backlog, and so it was kind of like being in a startup because there was a lot to be done, and I got to play the role of managing relationships with clients, things that junior partners in larger offices didn't even do.
Right, of course.
And so, and I enjoyed that because I just like people.
Right.
And I think I was good at the relationship management. And then when I left Mackenzie, I started an educational software company in Tokyo.
Okay.
In a joint venture with Sundai Yobiko, which is the big juku.
Now, how did you meet them? How did you get into that?
They went to the American Chamber of Commerce and were looking for somebody who could help them start a distance learning business because in their initial research they realized that the US was 20 or 30 years ahead of Japan. And the fact is that's still probably true. The problem is that the US is not advancing in that e-learning. Most e-learning is still boring and ineffective, and yet it's the solution that we're going to have. That right now we have the skills gap growing. Mm-hmm. So, for example,
in what areas?
Well, for example, autonomous vehicles are going to put tens of millions of people out of work. Mm-hmm. In the old days, when you would have the Industrial Revolution or whatever, those things happened over a decade or more. And so people would retire and they would be just a natural attrition. In today's world, where technology is just accelerating, and we have this mismatch between the skills that the people have or don't have and the needs that the new economy has. And so traditional education just doesn't work. It's too expensive, it's ineffective. In a classroom, the teacher has to decide, are they going to try to teach Howard Yamaguchi, who is one of the smartest kids, or are they going to try and teach Lance, who's the idiot, right? And most of them will pick somewhere in between, but they're always leaving out maybe 70% of the people. And so good e-learning, though, is able to personalize to the individual. And you can do it at your time, your pace, your way of learning. Every time that you interact with the program, it should say, okay, have you mastered this? If so, then we're going to bore you if we give you more of the same thing, so let's advance you. Are you not understanding at this level? We need to move you down to the basics so that you can have the foundation under which you can get to the next level.
Have you found a program that's good like that?
It's a passion project. I'm sitting on the board of a company.
Well, that's what you're doing now.
Well, it's one of the things. My major activity is the CEO of a company that does procurement for the U.S. defense industry, major defense contractors. Right. It's a very unique niche because most outsourcing of procurement goes to Philippines or Pakistan or India or something. But in the case of the defense industry, it has to be done by American citizens who have gone through security clearance on American soil.
So you're talking about weaponry then?
Building weapons.
That's what it has to be, okay.
Yeah. And you have to have traceability. Right. You have to know where every component was made. You have to go all the way back to the raw materials, right? So there's a lot of compliance.
So how'd you get to that? How'd you get involved in that? Who your connection? Just meeting someone and that's business?
I was actually 30 years ago was a founder because we spun this business out of a research institute, and they had been funded by DARPA, defense agency. Then I went off to Hong Kong to start a company, and so I told my partners, you take my 10%. But I'm still friends with those guys, and so about 5 years ago, the company had some major events and they needed someone to come in and stabilize. So my former business partner, who is now 87, he was 82 at the time, asked me if I could help out. And so I was doing that like 2 or 3 days a month, and the business has done very well, and so I think I can grow it even more. And so I'm spending more time on it. It's a small business.
But is it based here in Asia?
L.A.
Oh, it's in L.A.
It has to be in the U.S.
It has to be in the U.S.
Yeah.
That's right, because all the countries.
I live in New York, but the business is in L.A. And the pandemic actually helped us a lot because before that, everyone had to come to this office and have to be plugged in. But when these defense contractors had to go remote,
that allowed
everyone had to go remote, and
right.
It allows our people to work from home.
Okay, but you have to be on secure servers, of course, or something, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of security involved in terms of how the systems are set up.
That's interesting. Are you enjoying that?
Yeah, I do. The company is doing better than it ever has in its history, but at 70, I'm the youngest board member. There's 4 board members. Everyone else is over 85. And they are so sharp. They're sharper than me. Like one of them was number 2 globally in R&D for IBM. Another guy was major R&D guy, and he used to run that research institute where the technology was first developed. Okay. It's owned by USC. And then the third was vice chairman of Bank of the West, and he was chairman of the Bank of Hawaii or Hawaiian Bank or whatever. Very prominent, very capable. I don't want to say I hope that I am as sharp as they are when I'm their age, because they're sharper than me. So I aspire to be sharper when I'm in the late 80s. But these guys are just so brilliant, and
Do they talk about retirement?
They are retired. They're spending most of their time on not-for-profit, giving back. Mm-hmm. Very active in philanthropy. Right. Just extraordinary bunch of people, and that's why I do it. I enjoy them, and for them, it's they don't need this business, but they do it for the people. They do it for national security. They do it for all good reasons.
Right, yeah.
But the business is nicely profitable.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful. So that's what you're spending most of your time on now, or is it?
Yeah, about half my time, and then the rest of my time is spread across 6 or 8 early stage or.
Can you talk about them?
Sure.
Each one? Okay, what are they?
Well, one is this e-learning company,
Okay,
technology.
right.
They're in Minnesota.
How long have you been doing that, though?
Well,
E-learning.
I've been dabbling in it since the mid-'80s when I had that first startup.
Right.
And it's the same people. What happened was, after I started the company with Sundai, I started going to the U.S. with my team, and by the way, my chief technology officer was a black guy from Tallahassee, Florida.
For some reason, I think
David
here.
Brickler.
He was from here, right?
Yeah, I met him here.
He
was doing
seeing you
5th generation languages for Fujitsu when I met him. Just a brilliant
So he's
guy.
still doing it? He's still going?
I'm still in touch with him. I saw he's back in Florida. But he, when he was 11 years old, his sister, she was 14, and she was taking courses at Florida State University in computer sciences. And the other students are really struggling. And she said, "This stuff is so easy. I bet you my 11-year-old brother could ace this course." And so she brings David, and he aces the course, and he's just says, "This stuff is so easy. My 9-year-old brother could ace this course." So he brings his 9-year-old brother in to Florida State and doing these tests. It was just amazing, right? And they all went to Princeton, and just a super
it's
brilliant
when you meet
family.
people that are wired like that.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. That's why they're Mensa. The Mensa.
Yeah.
When you meet people that are that qualified, I've met a couple of people like that.
When he was 11 or 12, he became a vegetarian. He started studying all the Chinese philosophers. And so when he got to Princeton, he had this stack of books from Chinese philosophers, and he said, "I want to be able to read these in Chinese," right? So he studied computer sciences and Chinese. And so he can speak, read, write Mandarin, and same with Japanese. Just a really super bright guy.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I said, I met people like that before. So that's the second project. What's the next? What else are you working on?
There's a company that does it's developing solid-state EV batteries. They became a unicorn a year and a half ago.
Which is?
It's called Factorial Energy.
Okay, but what's the unicorn?
Oh, unicorn, they became worth over $1 billion.
Okay, that becomes, okay.
Yeah, with the investment from Mercedes and Stellantis. Stellantis is the old Fiat Chrysler and Renault combined. And they also are backed by Hyundai and Kia.
So what are you doing with them?
I'm advising the CEO.
Okay.
She's a first-time CEO. I was brought in by the chairman, who is my former client. He was the chairman and CEO of Panasonic North America. And so he asked me if I could help the company, and I've been doing some advising for them.
Okay. Next?
There's another client. He used to run...
So basically, you're advising companies. That's what you're doing the most. But
Yeah.
you have about 6 that are under your belt right now. And you're invested in how many? 2 of them?
Yeah,
two?
3 or 4 maybe.
3 or 4
yeah.
youngest, okay.
Another one is cybersecurity. And the founder was my former client. He used to run over half of Bell Labs because he ran all of the mobile technologies. You know, they invented the cell phone. After 9/11, he started this company with a bunch of ex-Bell Lab guys because he wanted to help with national security. And they've got this incredible portfolio of technology that they've developed. But they're engineers, they're not salespeople. And so I just advise them.
How to get their product out there, maybe?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Mostly they're talking to U.S. letter agencies and Defense Department. And then another one is contact management, contact as a service. The CEO is someone who I sat on the board of an earlier company of his. Very interesting guy, brilliant. He was born in Lebanon and was on the National Olympic Judo team. Went to McGill to get his PhD in computer sciences and became the captain of the Canadian judo team. And just a very hardworking, very bright, capable guy. So I could spend an hour talking about, you know, he's an just extraordinary guy. So ADHD, right? So if I go to his apartment, everything is like perfect. If I open his closet, everything is like,
so he's obviously single.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I open up any drawer, everything is lined up, color-coded. It's just extraordinary, right?
Sounds
You
like
could
one of
eat
my sons,
out
yeah.
of his toilet,
Right,
right?
right.
It's just amazing. Everything in his home. And so when I go to his house, I'll like move a chair a little bit like this, right?
So you're doing that.
Yeah. And I'll just like move some things around, right? And he walks in and he like scans the room and he goes over and he adjusts a chair, you know? I've always had a good memory until now, and so I developed terrible habits because I'm one of those people who will just have like piles of paper, and historically I always knew, you know, okay, well,
Exactly
it's
where it is.
like
It's midway.
here, right? I pull it, right, and I knew where everything was. Now I probably spend 15% of my time looking for stuff, because I was able, by having a good memory, I was able to be disorganized.
I see, right.
Because my mind could just, you know.
Well, you knew when you placed it there.
Yeah,
Okay, you
yeah.
say, I know what that is.
Yeah,
Just,
but now as I get older,
you need a filing system. Yeah.
yeah, and but I don't have those good habits of, you know, keeping things in the right place, and we also are dealing with a multiple in terms of the amount of information data that we have to keep track of.
Isn't that the truth?
Well, the other thing is that we get a lot of stuff that doesn't really matter because people just add us to the distribution list of an email, right?
That's true.
And then they're communicating back and forth, and it's just like, you know, I'm not going to read all this stuff, right? And then I spend probably a quarter of my time on various not-for-profit. I'm very active with the Harvard alumni community.
Why Harvard?
Harvard Business School.
I know, but why?
Oh. I somehow got sucked in.
Okay,
and,
because you
I've been
didn't go to
doing that
Harvard,
for. No, I did. I went to Harvard Business School.
I didn't know you went to Harvard
Yeah,
Business School.
yeah.
See,
You know, the thing is that now you have no respect for Harvard Business School because.
But I used to. But I used to take the. I used to get that as well.
Yeah.
But I didn't go to Harvard, and I know a lot of people that do the same, because it's a very good journal. Harvard Business School.
Yeah.
It's very good.
No, I'm on
You went to
the
Harvard.
board of 2 Harvard Business School
Is it? Okay.
organizations. Yeah.
Right.
And.
But didn't Reginald Lewis donate something to Harvard Business School? Didn't he? One of their buildings?
Possibly.
You remember
I know
Reginald
who he
Lewis?
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of
Beatrice
course.
Foods.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
Right. But most people don't know who he is.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm quite active with the U.S. Japan Council, which I think you should join. A wonderful organization, really noble cause in terms of the U.S.-Japan relationship, both government and business. So I think they're doing very tangible contributions, very meaningful work. And so I'm quite passionate about supporting them. And the other thing is that so many of my friends growing up, like Ernie Higa and Paul Yonamine and others, Fred Katayama, are actively involved also.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's like a reunion every time that there's an event.
That's nice.
Like last night there was an event, and
yes, I know.
I didn't know Paul was here, but he showed up, and
wow.
yeah. So it's a wonderful
That's nice. That's nice.
organization.
Lance, is there anything else that you want to talk about necessarily? Okay, because I didn't ask you about your marriage or anything like that. You don't want to talk.
No, I'm fine.
Do you have kids?
Yeah, I have a daughter and a stepdaughter.
How old is your daughter?
Both are 26. They're 4 months apart.
Okay.
So I'm married to someone who deserves sainthood. And she is just so perfect for me because she tolerates me. She's half Japanese. We have all these friends in common. We have all these likes and dislikes in common. We met back in November of 1976. I was a first-year student at Harvard Business School, and she was a sophomore in college, 5 years younger. And so cute. She had been a model, and she wanted nothing to do with me. I was like radioactive, right? And then about 15 years ago, she sent me a friend request on Facebook. And I happened to be flying from California to New York, where she lived. I turn on my phone, and I have this friend request. And so I said, oh, great. And so we had dinner that night, and we've been together ever since. Yeah.
You married her soon after that?
The next day, it was just the two of us, and we're having drinks, and I said, I was interested in you, right? And she goes, oh, okay. And kind of cynical about what a line, right? And then I said, well, how would you like to have a relationship? She goes, yeah, okay. And I said, but long distance relationships generally don't work. I'm in California, and I have joint custody of my daughter, so you would have to move to California. And she goes, okay, I have 100% custody of my daughter. It's okay. And I said, okay, well, let's see how this goes. That was October. It was October 27th. And I said, by the summer, we'll know how this relationship gestates. If it's working, you'll move to California, we'll get married, and that's it. And that was the second date, actually our first date, sort of. And it's been better for both of us than we expected. Like every relationship, it's not perfect, but it's about as perfect as we could expect. And every day, several times a day, I go in and I kiss her because I just know how blessed I am with this relationship. And our daughters are both an only child, and they always wanted to have a brother or sister. And at 13, they got together, and they love each other so much. They grew up, going through their teen years together. They're so different, but just they're true sisters. And so it's as older parents, because I was 45 when my daughter was born, and Jessie was 40. Her mother died when her mother was 60. She was 40 when Jessie was born. Her father was 60 when she was born. And and she was an only child. So she is very sensitive about being left without any family. And so we know that our daughters have each other.
Right.
So that's a real blessing.
That's beautiful.
And both of them love Japan. They love each other. And
they're not here though.
No, they both live in near us in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And people say, well, do you see much of the girls? And I say, well, maybe once every 3 weeks or something, so not very often. And then if you ask the girls, do you see your dad very often? I see him all the time. I see him like every 3 weeks. So it's just a perspective, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Different perspective, right. Before I end, there's always a question I like to ask. Knowing what you know now, being on this planet for 70 years and having been through all these businesses, which you're still involved with many of them, and still consulting so many, if you could go back in time and meet the younger Lance to give him advice, how old would he be and what advice would you give him?
Wow, I've made so many mistakes, but that's just part of the journey, right? As long as you learn from them, so you were in sports. I did wrestling, not sumo, but in high school and then in college. And it's about determination, it's about getting up and fighting again, and and having respect and so forth. So it's about learning and keeping going. So I don't know, despite all, I've made more mistakes than probably any person on this planet because I've been blessed by being able to be reckless and do so many things. So I'm not sure I would change too much because although there weren't, things weren't right all the time, I'm now at a place where I'm so fortunate and so blessed, and I'm blessed by all the scar tissue that I have. I'm blessed by my family that accepts me despite my quirkiness and, difficult personality at times. I'm blessed by friends who I've known for 50, 60 years. You can't take, many people will measure your success based on how much money you have in the bank, and I'm just not wired that way. I'm blessed by having so many true friends. There's one of my classmates who came to me for financial help because his wife had cancer and then the pandemic and so forth, right? And I said to him, thank you for coming to me because I know how hard that must have been for you, right? And that wasn't what he was expecting.
Of course.
But if we can help others and we have the capacity to help others, especially at 70, that's what we should be doing, right? So I don't try to judge people. Everyone has their own measures, but I can give them some guideposts. It's funny, last night I was with this very successful Japanese entrepreneur, and he asked me if I could meet his son in New York. And the son grew up in the U.S., both parents Japanese, but he doesn't speak Japanese. And I said, my biggest regret is not being able to speak Japanese as well as I could. And it's gotten worse over the years because I haven't been using it. And I said, you have to do that. And so he's now applying to Waseda. He told his parents, they're in shock because they've been asking him for years to study Japanese, right? And so the father said, I've been telling him. And I said, yeah, but you're his father. He's not going to listen to you, right? For me, I have no bone to pick or whatever, and he seems to listen. And so that made me feel so great that, because at home no one listens to me, right? Because I'm the dad, right? So I have to talk to other people's kids. I talked to another friend's son also, and I think, okay, well, these kids actually listen to me because they don't know what an idiot I am.
I want to thank you for this, man. This is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your friendship for, what is it, 40 years or
it's
something?
It's going to continue. It's going
yeah,
to continue.
hopefully it'll continue, and hopefully,
it's going to be interesting.
Hopefully we won't be in diapers.
Tell me about it. I don't want to, oh man, I think about it. In Japan right now happens to be the biggest seller of adult diapers in the world.
Wow.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't.
It's Japan.
Well, I can imagine, certainly on a per capita basis,
That's right.
it would be.
It is.
Because of the aging population. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to move like this so you don't hear the crinkle, right? You can tell that I'm not wearing anything plastic underneath.
I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast. Make sure you press like and subscribe. And never forget, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you're too blessed to be stressed.